Hey everybody, Alex Miller at Capneon here. I'm going to continue my mini series on privacy enhancing technologies over the next 2 weeks by talking about synthetic data and differential privacy. And this is going to be a little bit of a mini series because I think there's a lot of interesting things that can be said about these two together. Particularly, they often share some pros and cons. I'm mostly going to talk about synthetic data today. I'm going to lie about differential privacy a little bit, and then next week I'm going to explain the ways that I lied and where it's really different than synthetic data in ways I didn't get to. Let me get started. So, synthetic data, it has a pretty good name for this space. The idea is that you make new data that is less sensitive than the old data, and then hopefully you can do this in a way that meets the objectives you have at your business or whatever organization you're a part of. A good prototypical use case that's relatively simple is I wanted to give you, a third party, a data set, and you were going to analyze that data for me to provide me some kind of insight that's useful for my business. And where things get weird is I don't really want to analyze my data myself. I'd love it if you did it. But then maybe this is sensitive data I'm not really supposed to share with you because you're outside of my organization. So synthetic data is use some kind of algorithmic technique. Sometimes it's a little milder. It goes right into very sophisticated deep neural net methods. I'm going to generate a new data set, and I'm going to somehow capture the spirit of the old data set so that when you analyze that data, you get insights that are relevant regarding the real data. But then every row in that data set is a totally made up row, and there's no privacy issue. Where does differential privacy about this? So I'm going to lie about differential privacy here. There's more going on, but in a lot of differential privacy use cases, what's actually going to happen where the rubber meets the road is you're going to take your data set and you're going to add some noise to it in a certain amount, and that's going to protect the privacy in the data set, and then you're going to share that with that other party, and they're going to analyze it, and hopefully you added the noise in a way that's not going to screw up the conclusion. So really simple example, if I take a bunch of height data, I add some random plus minus, I probably end up randomly changing the mean of the heights a little bit, but then probably not enough to matter because some people's heights I edited up, some I edited down, just washes out in the end. And then somebody else I shared the data with is still learning the correct things about average height, hopefully. Quick interjection, tease a trailer for next week. How do these things work out if you've got a data set with a lot of outliers in it? Often not very well. If the tallest man in the world is in the old data set, do they end up with something like that in the new data set? And then are you adding the tallest man in the world? More to come. Next week, differential privacy. The story is really differential privacy is this whole mathematical theory of how much noise should you add. If you go to the website for this concept right now, it's not going to look anything like what I've been talking about. There's a whole other story there of, okay, I'm adding noise, that's great. Well, what is the right amount of noise to really provide people with privacy in an effective way? That's what I'm going to talk about next week. But once again, to a practical actor, your business side, you're an engineer just trying to get the thing ready and push it out. That mathematical theory might not be very relevant to you. Why am I presenting these together? I think they have very interesting and similar pros and cons. So what are the pros of these two techniques? And I'm going to explore this particular data sharing example especially. I give you that data set, that made up data set. It either could come from synthetic data or it could be the real data set with some noise added. When you're doing the analysis, you don't really care about any of this fancy bullshit that happened earlier in the pipeline. I maybe did a crazy fancy neural net to give you that data. I maybe did some very sophisticated mathematical analysis to figure out the right way to noisify that data. You don't have to care about any of that. You just have a regular data set. If you're a data analyst, you can put it in Excel. You can do all the things you would normally do to it. You don't have to worry that much about all the fancy stuff I did to create it. And that's great. And if you compare this with the encryption-oriented methods, which And some other ways I'll get to are very superior. There's no overhead for this outside party. I am having to do this thing. They don't have to run a special algorithm on encrypted data. They're just doing what they've always done, exactly how they've done it. It's great. It's very simple. It's lightweight. This slides in an insidious way right into the big con of these techniques, especially in this kind of use case, which is, well, that outside party that's analyzing the data, what reason do they have, if any, to have confidence that they are actually, in fact, getting the right conclusions from that made up data? And it's a pretty weird catch-22. You can do a really sophisticated neural net approach, just everything, just the best state-of-the-art techniques for synthetic data. You can run all kinds of statistical tests and see that, oh, it looks great like the original data. And then you train some particular model on it. It doesn't even have to be a real fancy model. You run multiple regression. You discover that the answers from this new data set are wrong. And the more sophisticated the method you use to produce this synthetic data, the more slippery it can be to figure out, well, what exactly is going wrong that I don't have the real data? I think this kind of differential privacy simplification is actually great because what you did was simple, you have a much better shot at analyzing, well, how wrong are my answers are going to be. This is all occurring, I'm the original owner of the data and I know what's going on and I can validate things. I've seen people use these techniques in ways I think probably are not good. Because if I just give that data set with no explanation, which was kind of the attraction, that data analyst, once again, this is a regular data set to them, they do not have any kind of shot of doing this analysis of, is this getting the right answers, etc. They don't even know whether to be worried or not, potentially. And this is pretty iffy. If they didn't watch my video, if you didn't watch my video, you can get into a dangerous lane where you feel like you know what you're doing, but maybe you don't. And that I gave this synthetic data to this outside data analyst. They were really comfortable with it because it looked like regular data. They sent some kind of insight back to me describing something that my business should do. This flow, there's no way for anybody to catch on that the synthetic data was not capturing the spirit of the data in the right way, and that insight that came back to me is maybe not a good insight. And I could do that work myself inside my organization, but, well, what's the point? So, to summarize, I think this area has a really strong pro and con. It's really easy for the downstream outsider to analyze the data or feel like they're analyzing the data. It's actually a lot harder to know if you got the right answer or not. You might have gotten the wrong answer and you might not know. Contrast that with an encryption-based method. More is required in handling the data for the downstream actor. They know they got exactly the right answer at the end of the day and that they're telling me the truth about what's in the data. All right, next week I will talk more about differential privacy. Differential privacy, as I mentioned, has some of the same pros and cons, but really differential privacy is about analyzing, when you're doing this relatively simple method to obscuring data of just adding noise, what is the right amount of noise to add and why. And I will talk more about other kinds of use cases that don't resemble this one and what is on the gobbledygook. I hate this. I hate the differential privacy Wikipedia page. I think it puts you straight into this weird mathematical theory, which is obscuring that the implementation phase is actually pretty straightforward. So I'll explain all this next week.